The pregnancy test sat on the counter, like it had been waiting for me all my life, two pink lines bright as a siren, and in the same breath my phone lit up with the messages. I wish I had never seen my husband Cameron telling his coworker Rachel, "You understand me in ways she never does, and sometimes I wonder what my life would be like if I'd met you first." So I signed the divorce papers with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, tore the test into pieces, so I wouldn't beg myself to stay, and I walked out with a backpack, a promise and a heartbeat inside me he didn't know about. I grew up in a house where silence did most of the talking, where staying together looked like separate bedrooms and love that expired quietly. And I told myself if I ever had a child, I would not let them breathe that kind of air, so I left the dishes, the couch, the wedding photo smiling, like it knew better. I left the life that made me feel replaceable, and I whispered to that tiny new life, "You will never doubt you are wanted, not for 1 second." 5 years later, I came back to this city with my daughter Aria, 4, and almost 5 green ribbons in her hair, because green is her favorite. Her small hand warm in mine as we stepped off the bus into a place that looked the same and not the same. And I told myself I wasn't running anymore. I was choosing, you know what I mean? I was choosing work, choosing roots, choosing a life that didn't apologize for being mine. We rented a one-room that smelled like laundry soap and rain. I picked up weekend shifts at a coffee shop called Brewers. And on my first morning, I wore a borrowed apron, carried a tray of 3 large coffees, got bumped from behind, and baptized a stranger's suit in hot espresso. Yeah, that happened. And before I could fall apart, the man looked at me with kind hazel eyes and said, "You okay? Not are you going to pay for this, or who do I sue? Just you, okay?" And when I nodded, he smiled and said, "Accidents happen." Then he tipped the kind of tip that buys groceries and left a card that read, "Harrison Cole, Cole Technologies." He emailed that night, said he'd seen my portfolio, said he needed branding for a new division, that this wasn't charity, I'm talented, and he needs talented people. And I showed up to a glass building with plants that were actually alive sat across from him while he poured water. Like we were equals, opened a folder with numbers that would stabilize me for months. And when I stepped back onto the sidewalk, hugging that folder like a life vest, I ran straight into the man I had built a firewall around in my head. Simone Cameron said like the name might break if he said it wrong, and the air thinned out between us while I remembered 1,000 versions of us that didn't make sense anymore. "Do you live here now?" he asked. I said, "I work here," and he said, "Same building, different floor, small world." And I laughed once because small world is what you say when the universe drags the past into the present without permission. I told myself I'd handle it. If I ever saw him, that I'd be polite but distant, that I'd keep Arya far from that ache. But life has a way of checking. If you're serious, 2 days later. We were at the park. Arya flying on the swings, and Cameron walked up holding 2 ice creams like a white flag. "It's just ice cream. No strings," he said. And there's a version of me that says no, but the one standing there said thank you. And Arya came running and looked up at him with her bright brown eyes and asked, "Do you have kids?" And he said no. And when she told him almost 5, his face did the math out loud. I sent her to the slide with a promise to keep where I can see you, and I faced the storm I had outrun by leaving. He didn't say, "Is she mine?" Like he was laying claim, he asked. Like he was asking for the truth he had forfeited. And I said, "Yes, she is." And his hands went to the back of his neck, like they always did when the ground moved under him. "You were pregnant when you left, and you didn't tell me," he said. And I said, "You were already gone even though you were still in the apartment." I would not raise a baby in a house where I had to win my husband back from a fantasy. And he said, "I deserve that, I do. But please let me know." Her don't punish her for my mistakes. The thing about walls is they keep danger out, and they keep air out too. So I wrote down rules on a napkin at a diner. Because if you make rules in a fancy place, they forget they work for you, Arya, first. No surprise visits schedules in ink. If you're late, you text before you are. And he agreed without theatrics. He asked for the preschool calendar. He added himself to the emergency contact list. He started showing up on Wednesdays with library books and a kite and an art set that made Arya squeal, and I watched her laugh in ways I couldn't create. Alone, a good ache, a scary relief. I told Harrison about the noise in my head, how fear and love kept stepping on each other's toes, and he said something simple that wouldn't leave me alone. Fear protects you from falling, but it also keeps you from flying. He wasn't judging me, he was naming a thing out loud, so I could decide if it still fit and when. The preschool sent home a flyer for dads and donuts. Arya held it like treasure and asked, "Do you think he could come?" And I said yes, and we both cried over clip art donuts because sometimes healing looks ridiculous and perfect. The day I told Arya the truth, we sat at a sunny picnic table with the ducks arguing like old men. I said, "Remember how you ask about your daddy? He doesn't live far away anymore. He's here," and Cameron knelt beside her with his hands open, said, "I didn't know about you, and that's on me. I want to be your dad if you want me." And she asked, "Do I have to call you Dad right now?" And he said, "Call me whatever feels right." And she said, "I'll try Dad, if you promise not to go away." And he said, "I promise," and I felt a stitch pull through a place in me I thought was torn beyond mending. We added a family therapist because love is not the only thing that needs a professional sometimes, Dr. Reynolds asked the questions that made us tell the truth in full sentences. He asked me what I was protecting when I left without telling Cameron. I said the baby, my sanity, the chance at a home that wasn't built on obligation. He asked Cameron what he was chasing when he wrote those messages, and Cameron didn't flinch. He said a version of himself that didn't feel like a failure every month. The test was negative, an audience that made me feel brave without doing the work, and I own it, no excuses. Consistency became the apology. You can see Cameron paid the rest of Arya's preschool tuition. Without making a speech about it, he moved to a ground floor place with a small second bedroom that had green sheets and a nightlight, and space for her drawings. He cooked spaghetti because that's her favorite, and he knows it now. He took the first fever night and sent updates that were calm, not panicked, and I slept for 3 hours straight for the first time in forever because I trusted him to keep her safe. Work settled into something steady because Harrison didn't just hand me a lifeline. He handed me a contract with a retainer, told me I was good, and he wanted to lock in good before someone else did, and I said yes with my whole body, because stability is a love language. And when he noticed my shoulders weren't living up by my ears anymore, he smiled and said, "You look lighter," and I said, "I am," and I meant it. The twist wasn't that Cameron wanted me back. I knew he would say it. Eventually, the twist was that he didn't try to earn me with speech. He earned me with Tuesday, with showing up on time, with calling himself out when he was sliding into old habits, and when he finally said, "I still love you." I never stopped. He didn't ask for a verdict. He asked for time, and I told him I wasn't ready to turn this into a second-chance romance, not yet. But I saw the work, and that mattered more than flowers ever did. On Arya's 5th birthday, he transformed the community room into a butterfly garden with paper wings and twinkle lights. Harrison came by with a watercolor set and a quiet hug because kindness doesn't need a microphone. Mrs. Patterson cried like a grandma on purpose. And when Arya blew out her candles, she wished that everybody would have a bed that smells like sunshine. And I'm telling you, if that doesn't reset your compass a little, I don't know what will. One evening, Cameron handed me a key on a simple ring and said, "Not a proposal, a possibility. It's to a little place with a blue door and space for Saturday pancakes on the patio. I'm not asking for an answer. I'm asking you to hold it and see how it feels in your hand. And I did. I held the weight of that key. The weight of 5 years. The weight of a life we might be brave enough to build slow. And I didn't say yes, and I didn't say no. I said we keep going. We choose Arya first. We let the doing decide for us. So what's the ending here? The victory is not a courthouse kiss or a social media caption with 10 lessons. The victory is smaller and stronger. A kid who sleeps easy in 2 safe homes. A mother who can breathe without counting the room. A father who learned that love is a verb with a calendar. And a woman who does not confuse guarding her heart with locking it up. And if you're waiting for me to say I took the key and moved in, I didn't, not yet. The key sits in a small dish by my door, like a question. I'm allowed to answer when the answer is real. Tell me what you think. Did I do right to leave when I was pregnant? Is forgiveness, strength, or naivete? Should a child's peace outrank an adult's fear every time you tell me? Tell me where you're watching from, and what the bravest choice looked like in your house. And if you're rooting for kids like Arya to grow up, knowing love can heal without pretending, it never hurt. Hit, subscribe, and drop your story in the comments so somebody out there feels less alone tonight.